Hi. Today, we're going to talk about some of the successes and challenges that we've had in the office with victims. And last episode, we talked about the success of the work and how it had expanded to be in 3 different states, how we opened the refuge for women and children for short-term care. That's basically for 24 hours to 15 days max that we can take care of women or children in our refuge. And also we talked about how we had opened up a children's home for girls who are pregnant by rape and incest. And we've been doing that since 2010. The interesting thing about our children's home is that we began the work with the children's home in 2010, right after we finished building the refuge for victims of violence. And basically, what happened in that situation is the children are basically housed in the refuge. We didn't have the property or a children's home for them to live in. Right now, we're building our children's home. We were able to purchase an additional piece of property behind the one that we have. And back there, we're building the children's home. We're still fundraising for it. It's pretty much above where the top of the windows are right now, the entire building. It has 10 bedrooms and a living room, an office, an observation room, showers and toilets, and a storage room. And so if you want to help us with the children's home, we are still raising funds to help us with that. But today I want to talk to you specifically about the successes and the challenges that we've had over the last 12 years in doing the justice ministry. One of the things that was really interesting when we began the work is the assumption that I was the one that was sending men to jail. I would get, I call them the paparazzi, the local media, when we'd have a big case and they would come and want to do interviews over what happened with those cases. And basically, it was really interesting. I remember the bunch of microphones and cameras in my face and cell phones in my face, and they're asking me about the case that had just gone to trial. It was a rape case of a child. And one of the reporters, he says, "Why is it that you hate men so much that you come to Honduras to send them all to jail?" And I had to explain, and I've had to explain that in great detail over the years, that it wasn't a matter of hating anybody. It was a matter of God calling me to advocate for victims to receive justice. And then there was another things that they'd say in the streets. They'd say, "Oh, the men don't beat their women because the gringo will send them to jail," or "the men don't rape girls because the gringo will send them to jail." I remember one time when I went to buy blocks, concrete blocks, to build our conference center building, which is the Frank Lawrence Memorial Educational Center. And as I pulled down in my truck, all of the men that were in the yard ran and hid behind this panel truck at the back of the yard where they were loading blocks into this truck for delivery. And I got out of my pickup and I started shouting, "Where's the boss? Where's the boss? I need to buy some blocks." And heads would begin to peek out from behind the panel truck. And finally a man came over who was the owner of the facility. And I did my business with him, and then I went over to inspect his blocks before I bought blocks. And the men were all like shuffling their feet, hands in their pockets, heads looking down. And jokingly I said to them, "Why did you all run away?" And they were like, "Well, every time your car pulls in somewhere, somebody goes to jail." And it was an interesting perception that the local men had of me as a person, being the face of the ministry and the work that we did. And so I began talking to them that I didn't hate men. I love men. Most of my friends are men. And that it was just a matter of helping victims who suffer violence. And one person said this guy, Jose, had run for the mountains and hadn't come back. And I said, "Well, why? And they said that he had problems with his girlfriend and figured that I was coming for him. It was pretty comical, but I began to do a program on the radio show that we had talking about men of valor, courageous men, honorable men, and that I needed their help. And there's been an interesting change since I did that. That was back in maybe 2011, 2010, 2011. And so now I receive lots of phone calls from men who help. A woman whose husband in the middle of the night is chasing her with a machete trying to kill her, and this man has taken her into his house and he's calling me for help, and he promises to keep her safe overnight until we can get the police to her the next day. And then there's other situations where, because we work with children at risk and rescue children who are victims of violence, that parents will tell their children that I'm a punishment, that if they don't behave, they're going to take them to me so that I can send them to the government orphanage. And I've actually had to confront a few parents in the streets who point and say to their children, there she is, there's Gracie. Now she's going to send you to jail. I'm going to send you to the government orphanage. And I'll tell the children right then and there in front of the parents that that's a lie, that my job is to protect children, not to... I'm telling you these stories because this will help you understand some of the things that developed over time. And then, I was in a restaurant one time, and the waitress came up and said, my husband got aggressive with me the other night, and I held out my cell phone and said, I've got Gracie's phone number. You hit me, I'm going to call her. It gives testimony to the impact of the ministry if these are the things that are going on in the minds of the people, in that they see that there's hope. When the political crisis hit in 2009, all of the other missionaries and ministries sort of stepped back. Things like USAID, Save the Children, World Vision, all of those organizations actually stopped doing their work during the political crisis. I was in the National Police Headquarters for a meeting one day during this time, and one of the generals came in and he says, what are you doing here? And I says, I have a meeting. We're doing this project. And he says, you're still working? And I'm like, what do you mean, are we still working? And he said, all of the other organizations have stopped working with us because of the political crisis. They don't want to be seen as part of one side or the other side. And I was really shocked by that, because at a time when the country was suffering more violence than it normally suffers, and when victims have just as much need of assistance, all of the other organizations were stepping back. I mean, the Peace Corps even left the country. I don't think they've even come back since that time. And I told them, listen, I have no political affiliation here. My job is to attend victims. And regardless of what is going on in the country, we'll be attending them. And then there were times where people in the street during this time would ask me to say, are you leaving? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, all the other missionaries have left. They're not doing work. Are you leaving? And they would have this look of panic on their face. And I'm like, I don't have any place to go to. This is my home. My husband and I, we sold our house. We sold everything. It was like when the Spanish conquistadors came to take over Latin America, they burned the ships, so there was no retreat. There's no retreat for me and my husband. This is our home. We have nothing to return to. And it was interesting when I told them these things, the looks on their face, it was relief. It was like, and it made me realize what an impact of hope this ministry is in this nation and in the areas that we work. For them to feel relief in a time of crisis that we weren't leaving was very impactful to me. But there were also a lot of challenges that we had, because as I told you in the last episode, when we started this ministry, we were told that less than 30% of the cases were ever reported of special crimes. We were told that less than 12% of those cases that were reported ever made it to the court, and about 1% of them ended in conviction. Because we added resources and training and counseling and supervision, we advocated for the victims, we were able to increase the number of denuncias, or police reports, up to about 90% of the cases, because the people had the confidence that something was going to happen, that justice was going to be served. And as a result of all of the advocacy and work that we did, the cases, we had 71% of the cases completed in the courts, either with conviction or in some cases the person was innocent, it wasn't them that had done it. But in the majority of them, there were convictions. In 2010, we had the only sex trafficking conviction in the entire country. And that was because officers that we had trained remembered in the middle of the night when they saw a 12-year-old walking with two guys on the street at midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, somewhere around there. They're like, oh, Gracie just did a training with us, and she said if we see men with young girls out on the streets at night, to find out their relationship. And what they discovered was a horrible case of men that took a girl, a 12-year-old, promised her work from the northern part of the country, and then sex trafficked her throughout the country, and were in the process of sex trafficking her to the United States within a few days. Her name was Haiti, and we rescued her, and we cared for her, and we got the investigation done. Went with her to court. I remember telling her that while she was in court that I would be in the secretary's office praying for her. And they went in, and maybe about 10 minutes later they came out, and I was in the spirit praying in the office, and they came in, and she saw me praying, and she was crying, and they said, she can't testify. She can't do it. And I sat down with her, and I said, Haiti, you can do this. God will give you the strength. As you're sitting in that chair, just look at the judge, look at the prosecutors. Don't look at those men, and tell what happened to you. And as you're sitting there, you'll feel Jesus' hands on your shoulder, because he'll be there with you. And as you saw when you came out, I'm praying. I'm going to be praying with you through this whole process. And at that moment, the prosecutor, the secretary for the judge, and another secretary for the judge, and someone else who was there, I don't know who she was, we all laid hands on Haiti, and we prayed over her. I hugged her, and I said, you can do this. With God's strength, you can do this. Just go tell what happened to you. And so they took her back into the courtroom, and that judge doesn't like me, and he wouldn't let me be in there, even though the law says I could be in there with her. And so I prayed, and I prayed. I was in the spirit praying, just every ounce of my body, praying and praying and praying. Our sponsors knew about the court case on our Facebook page, and they were praying. And about 20 minutes later, they came out, and she had a big smile on her face. And she said, Mommy Gracie, I did it. I told them. I felt God there with me. I was able. You're going to have to put up with it, because these cases are so emotional. And it's just, you can remember them so clearly, these moments. These are God moments. She said, I did it. I knew Jesus was there with me. And so we came home, and a couple hours later, the prosecutor called us and said that both men were convicted of sex trafficking and were being taken to the prison. That was the only sex trafficking conviction in 2010. We had a great deal of challenges, and as I see, there's not a whole lot of time left for our time together today. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about the successes of some of the things that we did. Over the years, with the 3 offices that we had, from 2006 until the end of beginning of 2006 to the end of 2011, we handled more than 6,000 special crimes cases with a 71% conviction rate. We trained more than 45,000 parents, students, and community leaders, more than 4,000 authorities, and we had that 71% clearance rate of cases. We'll talk a little bit more in our next episode about the 29% and what happened with the office after that. And hopefully we'll have time to talk about where this ministry is going. If not, we'll talk about that in the episode after that one. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.